If you've ever written a book, I guarantee at some point someone came to you and said, Your book was so good, it could have been a movie." I've never really understood why people say this. Not every book should become a movie. So what I'm going to do is look at some of the books on my shelf that have been adapted for the screen and just sort of compare the book and the film. And I'm going to start by looking at books that fit very squarely in this gritty crime genre. Starting with one of the fathers of that genre, Jim Thompson, and his novel, The Getaway. This novel is about a couple. They go on a crime spree, and then they go on the run from the law. It's been adapted twice for the screen. But when they adapt it, they really only adapt the first two acts. Because at the beginning of the third act, the book takes a sharp right turn, and if you've read it, you know exactly what I'm talking about. In that last act, Jim Thompson goes to a surreal place, where he wants to make a comment about crime and the impact it has on the relationship, and can a relationship hold up under that stress? You can absolutely read this book as a very dark crime story, or you can read it as a meta-commentary on this genre. You can really only watch the movies one way. They're certainly entertaining, but they don't get to the power and the surreal nature of Jim Thompson's novel. The knock you always hear about Easy Money, also known as Snabba Cash, is that it's basically a Swedish knockoff of James Ellroy, which to me sounds awesome. I love James Ellroy. It has a very standard James Ellroy sort of construct. You look at some people in business and in crime and in drug dealing and see the ways that they get entangled with one another. You get deeper and deeper into the Stockholm underworld. This is the first book of a trilogy. I've read the entire trilogy. It was made into a series of movies as well. The movies were okay. I like the rhythm of the book. I mean, Lapidus does a great job bringing these people and these crime stories to life. I'm also a big fan of the Netflix series Snabba Cash, which is based on this world, although it doesn't have any of the same characters. It just keeps building on the basic idea that people are connected. And if you know someone who's in crime, somehow you're going to get pulled into their world in a way that is really hard for you to ever get out of. If you watch my channel, you know I'm a fan of Don Winslow, and specifically the Cartel series. I've also read his book Savages, which is about three good friends in California who start a marijuana business that, unfortunately, attracts the attention of the cartels. It was made into a movie by Oliver Stone, and just look at this cast. The friends are played by Taylor Kitsch, Aaron Johnson, and Blake Lively. They are all great. And around them, you've got Benicio del Toro, Salma Hayek, John Travolta. I mean, is there anybody who's not in this movie? The movie was good. They made a couple decisions I didn't understand. Like, they put a voiceover over a big chunk of the movie, which I thought was fairly unnecessary. The story translates fine to the screen. And they changed the ending as well. I don't want to tell you how, because I don't want to spoil the book, but it seemed like a bit of a random decision. The book is definitely worth reading. The movie, I guess, is worth watching, but I think it was like 90% of a really good film. Talented Mr. Ripley, I don't want to spend too much time on it because I already have a video where I talk about this book. This book follows the evolution of a con man from low-level sociopath getting by in the world to a place where he commits murder and will do absolutely anything to stay in the high life that he has unexpectedly been thrust into. Patricia Highsmith writes some of the darkest, most insightful and scary books about human nature. This book was made into a movie recently with Matt Damon and Jude Law. It's also obviously the inspiration for movies like Saltburn. All those movies were good, but to get to the idea, the really creeping fear that Highsmith instills in you about human nature, you have to read the books. Next, Galveston by Nic Pizzolatto. I bought this because I love True Detective. I wanted to read everything that its writer-producer had ever written. Galveston fits very much in the Jim Thompson sort of world. It is a gritty crime novel about broken people making bad decisions. I think that if you go into it with that expectation, you're really going to like this book. And the movie that was made based on it equally tells that same story. Yes, my expectations were just so high coming out of True Detective, they were probably a little unfair. But if Pizzolatto had not gone down that TV route, definitely had a future as a novelist. I hope one day he writes another book. Moving back in time, you got Get Carter. This was the classic story about a gangster, a very bad man, who goes back to the town where he was born to investigate the death of his brother and ultimately avenge it. It was made into two movies, once with Michael Caine. The second one also had Michael Caine in it, but Sylvester Stallone was in the leading role. Both those movies were okay, but this is a classic story of revenge and a very enjoyable book. George V. Higgins is the most unappreciated crime writer in American history. I know that's a big statement, but he was so good at getting criminals to sit down and talk to each other. To talk to each other about their crimes, about their girlfriends, about other criminals. And because of that, his stories make wonderful movies. I actually have the movie tie-in edition here with Brad Pitt on the cover. This movie also had James Gandolfini in it, as well as a bunch of other really great actors, and it was really well directed. If you haven't seen this movie, definitely worth checking out. And then make your way through George V. Higgins' books, because the way he tells stories about criminals is not like anybody else in America. He is a truly distinct voice in American literature. I watched the movie Drive, directed by Nicholas Winding Refn, starring Ryan Gosling. I thought it was beautiful. It was unbelievable how they could make these quiet, spacious, hypnotic moments and then punctuate them with these awful scenes of violence. Went out, grabbed the book, read it. Again, I think my expectations might have been a little too high because look at these reviews. Riveting, perfect, startling, stunning, terrific, murderous. Yes, murderous. It's a crime novel by definition. I think that if I would have read this book first, I would have said, yeah, it's a pretty good book. I think the movie definitely just took it to a level. It allowed Nicholas Winding Refn to really strut his stuff as the director, introduced Ryan Gosling, gorgeous piece of cinema. So good book. This is one of the rare cases where I actually think I liked the movie a little bit better. And ditto for the last book that I want to talk about today. You Were Never Really Here. Jonathan Ames has written some great stuff for TV, great comedy. When I saw this movie was coming out with Joaquin Phoenix, directed by Lynn Ramsey, I said I should grab the book and read it first. This is a story of a hitman who's kind of righteous. He goes after people who are doing very bad things, tries to save kids who have been sucked into the system. The book itself feels like a bit of like the first chapter to a series. And I think if there had been a series based on this character where I could have seen him evolve over time, I would have really liked it. As it was, I think Lynn Ramsey's direction, Joaquin Phoenix, the movie took this story to just an even bigger level. And it also felt like a more contained level. Instead of ending it and saying, wait, where's the next movie in this series? I said, that was a really beautiful, violent, and kind of scary piece of cinema. If you like books like this and you want to support the channel, check out my novel, Sin Walks into the Desert. Shelf and Bound called it the best independent novel of 2015. And Kirkus Reviews said it was a sterling achievement featuring an ultra cool protagonist. So, sounds good. This is the story of an isolated and very violent young man who one day hears that his mentor, the legendary FBI agent El Viejo, has disappeared into the desert. And so he goes hiking out into the desert, trying to find the only person who was ever able to give his life structure and meaning. So if that sounds interesting, check it out. It's on Amazon.